Yo, this is your boy Miguel, and welcome to Common Conversations, the move forward. Yes, by now, you know we have this new concept called A New Hope. And I'm here with Missy, and we're about to get it in. I love the hey friends. Doesn't that just make you feel good, y'all? It's like this giggle, just like I get goosebumps. It's let's go. I'm going to find a way to use that hey friends in a bunch of other spaces. But welcome back to the podcast. So, at this point, we've talked about a little bit of everything. And if you're accustomed to talking or hearing our podcast, you know that nothing is unavailable, right? We talk about everything. And so today we're going to have, I think I always say an amazing conversation because I think our conversations are always amazing. But we are going to have a conversation I think is unique to my space. And so I kind of want to blurt it out because I don't have this conversation often. And so I'm uniquely excited.
Yay.
Right? And so I'm excited to have our guest here and that he's going to share this world that we're going to jump into. But Missy is going to grab the bull by the horns.
Yeah, I am. And it's funny that you say that. So I feel like this is a conversation that I get to have a lot, but I've never been able to have this conversation specifically with my friend Josh. So we're going to speak with Josh Kornberg. And I've known Josh since he was in high school.
Yeah, it's been a minute.
Yeah, it's forever. At least 16 years. I have pictures of you holding my oldest child, and she's about to turn 17. So it's been a minute.
So this is another conversation with two old people.
Yeah, right. We're really just focused on the oldness of
I
the
called
space.
one of our last guests old. I knew her we've known each other for a really long time. And then I thought about after I said it, I was like, that was kind of mean.
Well, that also outs me that I've known Josh since he was in high school, and I had a child at that time. So if Josh is old, then I don't even want to think about what that means. I am.
I would dare not use the word ancient. That is not the word I'm going
but
to
it
use.
is the word that came to mind.
Methuselah comes to mind.
I know, right? That did. Methuselah. Love it. Loving it. It's not an ugly name. So Josh, tell us, first of all, about who you are right now. What position do you have in the community?
Yeah.
How would people know you?
Sure. So my name is Josh Kornberg, and I have the honor of serving as the executive director of the Caesars Foundation of Floyd County. So a little bit about this role. We are a private foundation, and we provide grants and scholarships and small business loans all throughout Southern Indiana, but specifically focus on Floyd County. So that's what I have the honor of doing currently. Great team, great board. So love the work that I get to do now. Prior to this role, I've been in fund development. So I was the development director at Ivy Tech, the Science Center for a while. I was at Volunteers of America. So I've kind of had my stint in nonprofit. And so, that's a little bit about who I am and kind of where I'm at right now.
Wonderful. I am so excited that you're here, Josh. Yay.
I hope I don't let you guys down.
You're not going to, I promise.
We do kind of put it. We
my gosh.
Way up there at the top.
No pressure. So Josh, what we're here to talk about today, and again, just laying the groundwork for our listeners, as you know, we tell stories and we tell the truth because if we don't operate from a shared understanding, if we tell ourselves fairy tales, then we cannot move forward. We cannot have a new hope when we do not understand what our siblings are experiencing around us. So, Josh, what I would love to talk with you about today is, as a gay man who grew up in a church, can you talk a little bit about what your perception was or is about what the church is told about the LGBT community at large?
Yeah, I would be happy to. So maybe even before I jump into that, I think it would be helpful to maybe talk about how I got involved with the church and whatnot. So originally from Philadelphia, and my parents got divorced when I was young, and then mom met a fella from good old Southern Indiana. And so when we were in middle school, ended up moving out here to Southern Indiana and lived in New Albany. And during that time, there was a big push. I think everyone was just feeling this need, especially within our family, that we needed to try to get some things in alignment. And so, when things are a little chaotic, oftentimes people turn to faith, right? And so that's what happened in our family. And so we started going to church as a family. And that was, I'm not going to say short-lived. We did that a little bit here and there, but it wasn't an every week kind of thing. We did it, once a month and whatnot. However, during that time, I found community there, right? So I found my own home. I got really involved with my youth group and whatnot. So as a young man, I found my sense of belonging and my sense of connectedness in the church. And so that's how it all started. Fast forward, 5-10 10 years, something like that, I started actually working at the church. And so throughout high school, I volunteered a lot, and I was leading a small children's ministry up in Memphis, Indiana. And so I mean, we talk about like being involved with church, I was involved with church. I was working for a church. I was working for small churches. And then I got into college. I ended up taking an internship in Austin, Texas, and I worked for this mega church. And I mean, I was in it to win it. I was meeting all the right people. I was going to conferences and speaking and serving on panels. Like everyone wanted to hear from like this young mind within children's ministry. So I was really, really involved in the local church. I came back to Southern Indiana while I was going to school at IU Southeast, and started working for another pretty large church in the area. And that's really where this story starts to unfold. I knew from a young age that I was gay. And so that was, I think more than anything, I struggled to accept that for myself. And so I just always thought if I suppress that, I can just kind of walk right through that. And so now I have this tension within my own life, right? That I built up what I thought was going to be my career, and I was going to go into children's ministry, and that was going to be my ministry, and rah, rah, rah. Now I have to deal with this tension that I'm now in a place where I have to decide, am I going to be true to myself, or am I going to continue moving forward and just continue to suppress that, suppress who I am? And so at that point, I decided I am ready to accept that. And so ended up leaving the church, and it really caused a lot of internal turmoil. And so that's a little bit about the story, and I can get into more fun details later if we want to, but that is probably enough background to start that conversation. However, some of the things that I heard as a student and as a young adult that I feel like the church really instilled in me, is that I think it's safe to say that the church in general talks about homosexuality as a sin and all the things that come along with living a sinful life, right? And so I was in a space where I had to begin to wrap my head around this thing that I know I did not choose for myself. Now I'm being told that me just being a person is a sin. So like my existence, my very life is a sin. And so I have to begin to grapple with that. And so if I had to say what is one of the lies that I think the church tells us is that how I exist is a sin, and that's just not true.
So that is a really heavy label to carry upon yourself. While you're growing up, while you're young. And like I said, I met you because you were in leadership with Fellowship of Christian Athletes, and I was helping with that. And I would love to hear how that, when you're hearing those messages about yourself and people telling you who you are, how did that feel? And also, how were you able to tell yourself a different story?
So I think there are two things that took place here. I think the first part is I just never acknowledged it, right? Like I just never acknowledged being gay. And so if I never acknowledged it, I didn't have to deal with the label that came along with it. So if I just thought if I just could suppress it, that would be good enough for me. It wasn't until I got older, I wish I could tell you when it was. There was a very specific couple of years in my early 20s where I started to unpack this and really try to understand where I was at. And I always said to myself that I am a very sensible individual. I am a mindful individual. I'm going to make decisions that are thought out and that are respectful of myself and of others. And I always have said that about myself. And so to counteract some of these things that I heard, like I made this choice to be gay, I then could say to myself, if I am such a reasonable person, why would I have ever chosen this for myself? Like I would never no person would ever wake up in the morning and say, you know what I want to do today? I want to really screw my life up today. Like that's just not what we do. So like if I was going to choose to be gay or choose anything for myself, the much easier thing for me to do was to wake up and say, I think I want to be straight. Like if this was a choice, I would have made a different choice. Like I have not gone down this road because I'm like, oh, this is going to be so much fun. And I want to get ridiculed and I don't want to feel bad. And I want to do all these things different. Like no one does that. I'm very proud of who I am. But if I had to make this choice for myself, I would have made a very different choice because there's a much easier way to have gone. And this would not have been it.
Right. So tell us, if you're comfortable, in that journey when you did admit the truth to yourself and then to others, what did that look like? What shape did that take? Yeah,
so this was an interesting moment. So I actually did not make that decision by myself. Actually, someone else did that for me. So when I was in undergrad, I was involved with an organization, and let's see, without going into all the fun details of it, I I was quietly dating another person that was in the group. We ended up having an issue. And so rather than dealing with that like adults, which I thought we were, he chose to out me to my family. And that was an incredibly unfortunate situation. I was on vacation in Florida, and I will never forget the call I got from my mom. And I was sitting in the condo, and my buddy and I had just come back up from the beach, and she had been calling me. I left my phone up in the room, and she's like, Josh, are you okay? I said, yeah, I'm fine. What's going on? And she's like, I went outside this morning, and all over the garage, there were notes that says, like, your son's a fag, your son's gay. I mean, it was just horrendous. And I will never forget in that moment that I had to make the choice of what I wanted to do and how I wanted to process it. And like in that moment, I was talking to my mom on the phone, and she said, are you okay? And I just remember the only thing that I could muster up is, would you be okay having a gay son? And like that was the thing that popped into my head. It wasn't like, okay, well, I've got a lot of life to figure out right now. Right. It was like, are you going to be okay with this? And obviously she said she would love me regardless. And like that was a great moment for me and a very powerful moment. But in that split second, I very much remember like I had to make the decision of things were going to look different from now on, because my faith journey and my career at working in a church and my sexuality, like they couldn't coexist, at least at that juncture in life. And so I remember that moment was really, it was a moment that I just won't forget. It was a very pivotal moment in my process.
I'm so sorry that decision was made for you. What did it look like then? Like you said, your career, that trajectory had to change. So how did that happen?
Yeah. So, I am not one who just like lets life happen. Like life doesn't just happen to me. I pretty much like when I made that decision, I think I was in a state of like panic for, I don't know, probably 12 hours, went to sleep crying. I'm sure the person I was with had no idea what was going on. I stepped outside and I was just on the phone for hours at a time, calling people, just trying to console myself. And then the next morning, I remember waking up, I was laying in the bed in the condo that we were staying in. I'm like, all right, well, I've got to get another job because like I still have bills to pay, right? So like life still has to happen. So I remember it was like maybe a week or two before Christmas when all this happened. Yeah, surprise! It was a great Christmas.
It's a great time in the church calendar too.
It was just there was a lot. But I started applying for substitute teaching jobs. I'm like, I just need something, and I need to do something fast. So I remember I applied for a substitute teaching job, and I'm like, I'll figure the rest out later. I just need something to pay the bills for right now, right? I was renting this apartment, and I'm like, got to make some money somehow,
right?
So I got a call on the way back from Florida and had an interview and ended up substitute teaching, and I loved it. And that was how I spent the last semester of my college career. So my final semester as a college student, as an undergraduate, I had just come out, not by choice. I was the student body president at IUS,
yes,
and I was a substitute teacher. So that is how I spent my last 4 months as a student.
Let's go.
That was quite the moment.
I'm curious if you don't mind.
Yeah, please.
Like, so can I go back?
Sure.
You talked about your mom, but what was your experience with your dad?
Yeah. So mom and dad divorced when I was really young. Dad and my stepmom still live in Philadelphia. Very, what I would definitely call them more progressive. Like to them, it was not even an issue. Dad and stepmom were super chill. They're just wanting to know when they're going to meet a boyfriend, husband. Like they are ready for that.
Yes.
Yeah. So that was that side of the family. Mom and my stepdad. Mom, I think, took it really. I mean, obviously she's my mom, right? Like you love your children, and so mom had a really good process and whatnot. At that time, the one thing that if I could beg people that are listening to this, please do not do this to folks. My stepdad, I think in good faith, was trying to help, but he went and shared this information with all of my family. So right before the holidays, like grandparents and aunts and uncles. And so a conversation that I would have liked to have had with all of those individuals to feel that reaction and to be a part of their process with me, I never got to have. And even to this day, I still have not had many of those conversations, not because like I couldn't, it's just, it's such a non-issue at this point in life, and things look so different, 12 years later. So it doesn't really matter. So that's what happened there. I was sitting, I will never forget one morning, they asked if we could go out for breakfast. This was after I came back from Florida and before Christmas, so within that week or so. And we went out for breakfast one morning. And I remember sitting there and seeing my mom ask these questions. I mean, because I said, ask anything you want. Like, there's no question that's off limits. And she asked me if there's something that she could have done differently. And I hated that for her because she equated me being gay to something that she did as a parent. And I just feel like that was such an unfortunate place for her to be. And I hated that for her. And I don't know if, again, you want to talk about continual lies that we hear especially within the faith community. We think if you're gay or you identify in a certain way, then it must be because something else happened to you. Nothing happened to me. I had a great childhood. Like I had a real, like I came from just to be quite frank, I was a very privileged background. I needed for nothing, wanted for nothing. Like it's not like I had a life and a childhood filled with trauma and just really crazy situation. Like that was not it. And again, if trauma equated to homosexuality, there would be a lot more gay people.
So many.
Right?
So many.
So, I mean, I had such a normal upbringing. And so to see my mom take on all of this, it almost was like she was trying to take the weight off of me by saying, oh, could I have done this differently? And parents or guardians, if you hear this, like the answer is no. Like it has nothing to do with you. It's not about something that you've done. It's about a person who is identifying with how they feel and how they are. Like it's not about a parent or a guardian. It's about the person. And so it's so tough to keep that in check. So I hope that answered.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a story. So one of my best friends in high school was gay, and the running joke amongst all of us to this day is we knew he was gay before he probably knew he was gay. And I always wondered, and I haven't kept in touch with him, but I always wondered the reaction his father had. And so his dad was this really strong Southern Alabama kind of dude, right? And so, it was just always a thing. But I know when I finally asked him, without getting into that story, his dad was like, dad was super cool, which surprised us all. And so I always wonder about that question when folks do come out and how their family reacts. I know how I would react, and I know I'd have 101 questions because that is not.
That's right.
It's not who I am, and so there's this curiosity that comes with it. And sometimes it's healthy and sometimes it's probably not. And so I know your relationships have to be healthy in order to get through that kind of conversation.
Yeah.
So I'm curious too, like did you leave the church or did the church leave you in that sense? So
I remember this. I mean, this was such a very clear moment for me. And actually, I just wrote a little piece about it because I don't want to forget these things that people say to me. And so I literally just wrote this maybe 2 weeks ago. I told my direct supervisor, who was the children's pastor at the time, and I can say this. He doesn't work there anymore. He was like, you're good. Like, stay here. We need you here. Like, you have too much to offer. And I'm like, I can't do that. Like, I know that the right thing for me to do is to bow out gracefully. And so because I was finishing up my senior year at that moment, I started looking into grad school. And so I started looking places out of town. And so like I if you would have asked me at that moment, I was going to go to Tennessee State University and get my MPA, love TSU. And that was the plan. And so I took the position that the church wasn't doing anything to me. I am taking the position of I don't want the church to ever have to answer that question. That's not their responsibility. That's my responsibility to find a place where there's alignment, and I knew that there wasn't. And so I took the role in the stance that if this is the case, then I'm going to step away and I'm going to try to do it as gracefully and as quietly as possible. So around that time of year, it's like the Super Bowl for church, right?
Yes, it is.
Christmas, and then it's New Year. And so all of those things. And so for those last couple of weeks, I remember I just kind of quietly packed up my office. I kept doing some writing on the side for them, like just to help them through the end of the year. But that was about about all I did. And so after the first of the year, I remember going into the senior pastor's office, and we had probably one of the most memorable conversations that I will ever recall. It was memorable for two reasons. One was incredibly traumatizing. Second one was incredibly supportive. So the first part of that conversation was, and I appreciate why he asked this. I think it's a little wackadoo when I think about like the lies that the truth says about, or the lies that the church shares about our LGBTQ plus community. But he asked me very clearly and without any hesitation, he's like, I'm just going to ask you, did you ever do anything or touch any child or anything
Lord
like
help
that?
Us.
And so in my mind in that moment, again, the first part that I learned was that the church equates being gay with being a child predator. And
it's so true.
And that is a reality that you have to deal with. And it's not true at all, ever.
No, there is zero.
So
no correlation.
There is no correlation there.
Oh, for goodness sake.
So that was
almighty.
the first part. So that was a little disheartening. The second part of that conversation, though, is one that I will always hold on to because I think it's so true and so wise. And at that moment, I said, I'm going to step away. I want the message that goes out to folks to be, I'm stepping away to get ready to go to grad school. And that's what the message was going to be. We were all very unified in that. So if people ask me, I'm stepping away to go to grad school. Ask any staff, I'm stepping away to go to grad school. That was the plan. I thought it would be the most respectful way to bow out without causing any sort of issue. I could assure them that there was not going to be any sort of issue that was going to pop up. But so there's that. But in that conversation, he looked at me and he said, Josh, I hope that during this next season of your life, as you're sifting through all of this, which was a lot, he said, I hope you just take some time, like take time for yourself, take time to process, take the time that you need to heal. And that was probably the best advice that I think anyone's ever given me.
Yes.
While so simple, it was so profound in that moment of such uncertainty, just taking time to heal and taking time to process. Like we oftentimes just don't allow ourselves the freedom to press the pause button very long. But he reminded me of that. And that was exactly what I needed in that moment.
That is truly beautiful. Not that I'm super excited to bring up trauma and triggers for you.
Sure.
But when you started to live openly and live as the human being that you were created to be. How did that affect you in the community? Again, because you know this is a small town.
Yeah. So good. So here's the next phase of that story. I didn't end up leaving to go to Nashville. I stayed here in the area because my thought was I would only go to Nashville if I could get a job down there, and then I would go and do school at night. My goodness, I wanted to get out of this area like no one else's business. However, that was just not the cards I was dealt. So I ended up staying in the area and getting a job in Louisville. And so I moved over to a condo in Louisville. And those first couple of years after I had really accepted who I was and came out, it was pretty quiet. Like I wasn't really ready to deal with who I was. I wasn't comfortable with who I was just yet. I was still trying to deal with all of that. So those first couple of years were really kind of stagnant. I didn't date. It was very, very quiet. It was just a lot of introspective work and just trying to figure out what this next phase of life was going to be. But I will tell you that first job that I got out of college, whether someone believes in God or not, like I know it was a truly divine intervention because I left the church 6 months prior, ended up getting this job in July, August of that year. Of 2012, and that was at Volunteers of America. And Volunteers of America it's actually a church, right? Like it's an actual church, and their mission statement is to be a ministry of service. And I thought it was so incredible that at a moment where I felt, but I'm not going to say betrayed by the church, but maybe left behind, left out, I now found myself working for an organization that is a church, but not in the way that we think about a church with having four walls, and still doing great work out in the community and making life-changing impact. And that's now the next phase of my journey. And I couldn't have asked for a better place to land at that moment because there was still so much trauma and so much uncertainty that I was dealing with. The fact that I feel like a door opened up and I am now working at a church again, just not what I would consider a church. I think I saw that my service to the community didn't end under a steeple. It kept going because the people that I was impacting was really why I was doing that ministry in the first place.
Yes, the Volunteers of America and their work. I was not aware they are a church.
They are.
So the fact that they lead by loving, and they truly do an incredible job of loving on people. I love that that's where you landed.
I had no idea, like when I took that job, I had no idea that that's what I was signing up for. I'm just like, well, I'm going to be a volunteer coordinator. And then like, as I start to learn about the organization, I'm like, this is like, you couldn't have written a better story or a more cohesive story to talk about like where I was going to land.
Yes. So one of the things that we talk about in this space often is the idea of equity. And I also, the concepts of freedom and justice come to mind with this story. In what moments do you think, and how do you think that someone could bring equity? Like, I'm thinking about your story. How can we bring equity? How can we truly love? If we say we love our neighbors, how do we truly love every member of our community and bring freedom to people of faith who are part of the LGBT plus community?
Yeah, that's, I will share from, again, I can only speak from one perspective, and I am still very involved in my faith and in my faith community. Like, that is still very much a part of who I am. And so it's not like so if someone's listening to this, not like I didn't walk away from that part of who I am. It's still a very instrumental part of my life. If I was to encourage someone from a faith community that is struggling with this area, and maybe not identifying as gay, but maybe how they accept and how they might present a little differently, or how they might be more welcoming to members of the LGBTQ community, a couple things that I might recommend. One, I would just say to educate yourself. That's the first part. I think people are so scared of individuals from the gay community because there is this untruth that exists. And this is probably the strongest that I hear from the faith community, is that being gay equates to pedophilia. And like, that is such a strong feeling in the faith community that if you hear nothing else from this, like, fight that. Like that. Yes. There is no grounds for any of that sort of behavior. Say whatever you want about sin or not, but if as a church and as a group of believers we can say this isn't the same, right? A gay person does not equate to pedophilia. I am not a pedophile because I am gay. Like that, it doesn't work that way. And so if we're just thinking about like what things can people of faith do right now in their own faith community, that would be the first part. The second part is I will also challenge people to get to know folks within their own faith community. I can guarantee you, regardless of which congregation or group you're a part of, there is someone who identifies as gay within your community. Get to know them, because it's so hard to hold a grudge against somebody for being a certain way when you actually get to know them.
Yes.
And that's a reason that I feel like this is so important for me to share, right? Because as a gay man, I'm in a rather predominant role in the community. It's really hard to be anti-Josh, right? Like when people know me.
It truly is. If you all knew Josh, you would love Josh immediately.
And I'm not even saying that like because I think I'm a great person. That's not even it. Like, but when you know a person, it's so much harder to hate them. We find this layer of distrust and this layer of hatred built within ourselves and within our community out of a place that we just are assuming and presuming that we know about this person. But get to know the people who identify in a specific way, not because they identify as gay, but like get to know who they are as a person and get to know them as an individual, because there's a lot more to me and to every other gay person than just being gay. Like I am not a gay, like I'm just not a gay, like that's not who I am. I am so much more than that. Yes. Like I am a person and I have likes and hobbies and things that I like to do on the weekends. Like me being gay is not all who I am. There's so much more.
And obviously I don't want to decenter Josh in this space, but I do want to point out that we are lucky enough to have some churches in this community that are doing an incredible job of loving everyone. But in Southern Indiana, I'm thinking of St. Mark's. In Louisville, and I mean, full disclosure and transparency, I'm a deacon at Highland Baptist Church, but we are a fully inclusive and welcoming space. Our children, our youth group, completely safe, and That is our half of our deacons are gay. So there are places. When I say the church and we speak about the church at large, there are places that you can find home and love and welcome, and places to heal from the trauma that you've grown up with.
So I'll also share with you, like my current church that I attend is not what I would consider a gay affirming church. However, like as a person of faith, I very much believe that what I just said is true. Who I am more than just a gay person. And as such, like when I walk into the halls of the church that I attend, like I'm not there because I'm gay. Like I'm there because I am seeking, and I hope that, people of faith can appreciate this. Like I'm there because I'm seeking a deeper relationship with a person who I think created me and gave me life. Like, so I'm not going to walk away from a non-affirming church because that's not why I am in church. Like I didn't start going to church because I needed a place to find community of fellow gays. Like, that's not why I'm there. And so I think as a church, we have over-sexualized the church more than any other institution in society, period. Like, no other place talks about sex and gays more than the church. Like, we over-sexualize everything at the church. And
it's so true.
That's not why we're there, though.
No, it's funny that you say that while a large portion of our congregation is gay, we almost never talk about it. The thing we do talk about is the trauma that a lot of our members and the people that we love and who worship with us, the trauma that they carry in, and what to do that and how to hold each other's trauma and love on each other while we're healing. And I think that that's such a good point. If your church is talking about sex every single week, that's way more than it should be. I mean, like the Bible just doesn't touch on it that much. Bless.
So Josh, I'm curious, I grew up Seventh-day Adventist, United Methodist, AME, spent some time in a Baptist church. My mom was Catholic. So,
you've done it all. It's like a buffet of religion.
Absolutely. And I've heard, you get the buffet of stories, right? And trauma, and stigma. And so I'm curious too, if you would share, how did you, or are you still reconciling many of the lessons that come out of church leadership as homosexuality being a sin, or, homosexuals are predators? How do you reconcile that?
Yeah. So this takes me back to when I lived over in Louisville. I was attending this church and they were looking for a children's pastor at that time. And clearly I had years of experience in this type of work. And so I went to the senior pastor. I said, hey, I don't know, I'm not looking to do this full time, but if you need someone on an interim basis, like I'll help through this period. And so I told him a little bit about my history. He said, well, so why did you leave? And I told him I came out and this and that. And then he told me, again, one of those moments that will just be seared in my brain forever. He told me that at that church, there are 3 different levels of engagement. The first one, behind the scenes, running the soundboard, making breakfast on Sunday mornings for the congregation. The second one would be like on the stage, leading worship, leading Bible study, just more public facing. And then the third level would be actually teaching. And he said, I think with where you're at, we can probably get you in at the first level. And so, so I could have made scrambled eggs.
I mean,
that would have been good.
Ridiculous.
Now, so I say that to kind of set a little bit of a groundwork to your next question, Miguel. So how do I reconcile with that trauma? And it's the fact that I now have to see my relationship with the church probably more from a one-way street. I used to think and used to engage the church very much in a two-way relationship where I would give of myself and I would allow myself to serve and to be very involved and engaged with my church. I now find myself, so how do I deal with that? I think it's through this second part is now my relationship with my church is very one way. It's very much where I receive, and I take that as a part of this is what I need to grow in a personal relationship. I don't really need all the community side of that. And And so I don't go to church where a lot of folks go to church looking for community. I'm not really seeking that. I feel like I have a really strong support system outside of the walls of the church. And whether that's right or wrong, and to be determined, or that's for me to decide. And right now I'm good with how it's working. I've got my own supports. I've got people who love me. And so when I go into church, it's very much I'm going to take what I need from this, get filled up, give myself that energy that I need. And if there's an opportunity for me to do good, and on some occasions I'll engage, like I'll participate in, this kind of drive, or you need me to bring in this, or I can serve in this very minimal capacity. I'll do those things, but not really. And I'm okay with that. I've come to a spot where I'm like, I'm good with that. And I know that my community of support is outside of the walls of the church.
Man, that's a good level of strength. But thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
That's because church hurt comes from a lot of different places,
That's right.
and we react individually toward whatever that is.
Mm-hmm.
I can't imagine. Well, I can not being gay, but I can imagine the church issues and being a part of that. And I love the fact that I left the church, right? And so mine comes from spousal abuse and that relationship. And it took years for me to go back to even see people in that space differently. I love the fact that you said I can stay there, get what I need out of it, and then move on. And you even built your own community that supports you. And I think that in itself is unique. Because I don't know, when we talk about, this conversation is a little different, but it's not much in a sense. We talk about systems and the failure of systems, where we are in our society and the norms that we exist in that no longer, and sometimes never served us as individuals in the get-go. And that is a hell of a point, is to build community and to build systems that actually support you, man, brother. I appreciate you.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, and I really do mean this. Like, I feel like if someone was to ask me, like, how is your spiritual life now? I would say it's stronger now than I feel like it's ever been, because I'm more certain of things than I've ever been before. Like, in the past, I've always been questioning myself, like, can I exist in this space, and can I exist in that space? And my only answer to that is like for people who are struggling with this acceptance of, like, can I be gay and have some sort of faith, like, can that exist? And my answer is, like, absolutely they can. And the reason that they can is because every day, like, I wake up asking myself, like, what is the next thing that I can do right now, today? Like, it comes very much from, like, an AA model. But, like, when I think about it, like, in my personal faith relationship, like, what's the next thing that I can do right now to make my relationship better with my creator and my community? And if I can do that next thing today, who cares what people think about me within the confines of a church? Like, that doesn't matter to me. So, like, what's the thing? How am I going to continue to take one further step forward today? How am I going to make the world a little bit better today than it was yesterday? And if every person, regardless of faith, doesn't wake up thinking that way, like, that perhaps should be a something that we all strive for. Like, what's that one thing that I can do today to make our collective community, our world, a better place to be? Like, that's what faith is about. Like, that's what I get jazzed up about. When I go into church, it's not like I'm looking for these things to give me all this life guidance. It's to get re-energized, and it's to get reconnected with myself, and to give myself an opportunity to reconnect with the one who I believe made me perfectly how I am. And I don't need all the other stuff. Like, my goal for today is to leave things better than they were yesterday. And, like, if that's not the core of faith, I don't know what it is.
So, friend, I want to say that I believe that every day you make the world a better place. But today you added to your community by having this conversation.
So pleased to do. And thanks for letting me share some of the story.
Yes, I'm so excited. And thank you so much. And thank you for making yourself vulnerable and telling your truths, but also your growth, because somebody is listening and someone needs to hear, this can be my path. And I don't have to live in a space that I'm not fully myself or fully actualized, and I can be successful.
That's
so
right.
Thank you for that.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for inviting me today.
Anytime, you can come back anytime. Yo, this is Common Conversation. This is Miguel, and this is
Missy.
Yo, and this is the Move Forward, a New Hope. We hope that you picked us up on all our podcast channels, and come check us out as we get ready to do some of these live panel discussions where we're going to tackle the same topics in really start talking about how we have these conversations. They're not always going to be comfortable, and they're not always going to be as easy as Josh made this appear. I'm just, because, if you don't hear it, he has a long journey of reconciling the people that has been in his life, probably had to rebuild relationships, and we're all going to have to do that along this journey. So, check us out. Come on through. This is Common Conversations. Let's get it. Let's go. We love you. Peace, love, and hair grease.
Bye, friends.